Hi all, welcome back to my YouTube channel and another 1 hour in my sketchbook video. So I hope you've all been well, and I'm actually pleased to be doing this hour in a sketchbook. To be honest, I'm always pleased when I do these. They're really super easy and fun to do. Well, not always super easy, as the cloud study proved, but they are definitely fun and do help expand my skills as an artist, and I hope you find these enjoyable to either watch or maybe give you ideas on things that you want to improve on or things like that. Anyway, I am focusing on hands, as you'll see by now. I did actually draw all these out in pencil before I started painting them, and before I filmed it, simply because one, when I draw I do tend to lean over the page, so all you'd see is the back of my head, which really isn't that appealing, but also because it would take me more than an hour to then be able to get all these pieces done. Especially with hands, I'm not at that point or at that confidence level where I feel confident in being able to draw and paint several hands in 1 hour. Maybe if I was just doing the one hand, which is something I might do in the future one, where I draw it out and paint it all in 1 hour for a video, in case anyone's interested in how I draw out hands. It's mainly with me making lots of mistakes and having to rub them out. But I did do references for this. I looked up several different references and hand poses, and I wanted to come up with a couple that were all slightly different and would have different like shadows and highlights depending on how the hand was positioned. If you can hear that, sorry, that's our dog. He's going a bit mental at the minute. But yeah, so that's what I wanted to do. So I did use references. I don't think I'm ever going to be at that confidence level where I feel comfortable in being able to create and draw hands without using any reference, simply because I do find these more challenging to do. But yeah, as said, started this hour in the sketchbook with painting the hands, and of course I'm using gouache, which is, I will hand heart say, my favourite medium. I've kind of stopped using acrylic and watercolour altogether, simply because I just find the medium so much easier to use. It's so much more vivid than watercolour, and yet it's so much smoother and easier to paint with than acrylic. So I just find it is the perfect medium for me, especially working on paper. Yeah, it is really good. Obviously, if you want to hear my full thoughts on it, I do have a review where I was using Reeves gouache for the very first time, and I am going to be doing a more up-to-date version soon, where I compare a couple of Windsor & Newton designer gouache to my Reeves gouache. That is going to be a video in the future, fingers crossed. But anyway, for this piece, like I said, I really wanted to focus on hands simply because I wanted the practice, and I always find that my proportions and stuff when I do fingers aren't quite right, and for some reason I always tend to do fingers really fat. I don't know why, it just always comes out that way. But yeah, so I thought I would spend a page just practicing and trying to refine my skills on that. I mean, for this, I did enjoy it. For me, the main way I painted these was I did a medium skin tone, depending on whether it was more peachy skin or whether it was the purple or green skin that I was doing. I did a medium tone and did that all over, and then I went in with a darker tone to do all the shadows, which was mainly where, so say if the fingers were curled in over the palm, I'd put a shadow in there, or like creases in the palm, because obviously when you look at your hand, it's not smooth skin, especially on the palm. You've got all the creases in your skin, which does show up, and then obviously you've got all the joints in your fingers and thumb and everything. So all of those I tried doing slightly darker, just because one, when you're actually looking at your hand, you do notice that those parts are darker, just because of the way the light gets caught in all the grooves and things like this, so you'll notice you'll have more shadows there. So I was trying to mimic that. I did find it a bit difficult, the purple hand especially. I think I went in a bit too heavy-handed, and I messed up a couple of the fingers where they're a bit too fat. And I think honestly this is the one where I think the proportions are the worst, I did try, but honestly I think probably could have refined it a little bit more. But you know what, it's a study, this is what it's for. It's not for complete finished pieces all the time. My favourite was definitely the bright pink hand. I loved the way that turned out. Well, obviously I love pink, but I loved how vibrant that pink was, and I liked the fact that because it's so vibrant, that's what's giving off the shadow effect and the detailing on the palm and that. I don't know, I think it just turned out really well. That and also the more natural flesh coloured one I really liked as well. I liked the way the fingers curled. I liked the fact that I was able to get a bit more detailing in like the ridge of like between where the bone and then your more fatty part of your finger meet. I was really happy with that actually, whereas the green and purple one I struggled with a bit more. I think the green one simply because it's a colour I don't really use. I don't really use green too much, although I am planning to use it more in a piece I've got upcoming. But yeah, it's not a colour I feel most comfortable with. And I also think the proportion's slightly out, like the thumb seems slightly out of proportion to the rest of the hand. I think maybe where I've done the bottom part of the meaty part of your thumb going into your palm. I'm sorry, I don't really know what it's called, but that part of it I just thought, I don't think it's been rendered especially well. It's a bit too stiff and not really as natural looking, which is a shame, but I think that's part of why I don't like that green one, and as I've already pointed out some of the negatives with the purple one. Whereas the other two, one, I'm a bit happier with those sort of colour palette, and two, I just feel they look more natural anyway. But yeah, so it was fun to do. It honestly, painting them was a lot easier than what I thought it'd be, because I always struggle with drawing them, and I think to actually draw out these four, it took me maybe just over an hour, which normally drawing would take me 10 minutes or so. I don't spend too much time drawing things out, but it took me so long because, as I said, I keep having to rub them out and redo it and just trying to get those proportions right. But actually painting them was a lot more simple, and I think that's just because I've built up on my knowledge, thanks to Inktober actually, on like values and where like shadows and stuff should be and how that affects the colours that you're using. And so actually Inktober helped a lot with that, simply because I couldn't use any colour, so I wasn't hiding it. And like with these hands, I've tried using the same colour, just different tones of it, to get those shadows and highlights. So yeah, so that's helped. So I think Inktober's definitely helped with being able to improve upon my painting, which is great. Sorry, that was a really badly worded sentence there. I'm actually rather hungry, so I'm going to start wrapping this up now. I hope you do enjoy these little hour in my sketchbook videos as much as I enjoy creating them. Have you got things that you prefer to focus on? So like one that I want to do in the future is mouths, and a couple of other ideas I've got lined up. But what are some things that you struggle doing, if you struggle doing things, or things that you just want to improve at? Anyway, that's enough of me rambling. I'll catch you next week.